Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Great. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to be here today. I am super excited for this panel. We only have 45 minutes, and I think there's going to be a lot of wisdom and interesting insights and perspectives today. So I want to jump right in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Grab. I'm the Associate Director at The Garage, and I am super excited for our three panelists that we have today. I'm going to introduce super briefly, but I'll leave it to you guys to describe what your companies do in a few minutes. So we have Pat Schnettler, who graduated back in 2013 from Northwestern, and is the founder of 12 Tides. Natasha Ramanujam, who graduated in 2015 and is the co-founder of Monarch Parents. And Sonia Nigam, who graduated in 2017 and is the co-founder of Change, along with her Northwestern classmate, Amar Shah. So again, thank you all for being here with us today. I want to rewind and start. I'm curious what each of you studied while you were students at Northwestern and what you thought you wanted to do after graduation. So Sonia, maybe if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So I studied computer science and I also minored in BIP. And after college, I always knew I wanted to go back into technology, but I wasn't sure if it was in the engineering capacity, in the product capacity. I actually started out at Northwestern completely undecided. And I found myself really gravitating towards the building component. And at the end of the day, I realized that, I really wanted to own the whole product and take it to life. And I knew entrepreneurship was kind of at the heart of what I wanted to do. And so for me, engineering was a really great tool to have at the back pocket to be able to build ideas and tinker with them. And so I thought it was like a really liberating experience for myself. And so that's how I ended up becoming a software engineer out of college at Braintree, and then later co-founding the company.
Great. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Natasha, what did you study and what did you want?
Oh man, very different than Sonia. I actually studied music performance at Northwestern, so I was in Bienen. What did I think I wanted to do? When I was a freshman, when I started my music degree, I thought I wanted to play in a symphony orchestra, and I was very keen on that. But very quickly realized I had some other interests, and Northwestern was a perfect place to really explore. So in addition to music, I studied global health, and that's kind of where I started my global health career. And it immediately after Northwestern, I started pursuing research in the global health space, and it kind of gave me the exposure that I really needed to really understand the types of problems that I was interested in solving, and also kind of having a nuanced understanding of how exactly should I start to think about, approaching some of these issues. So yeah, it was a transformative time. Unfortunately, I don't use my music degree anymore, but I'd like to think that there are some, supplemental factors from that degree that I definitely use in my career now. So yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like while you were in school, you had no intention or no plans of being an entrepreneur or starting a company, right?
That's true. Yeah, no, I actually had never even thought about it. I really don't know. I actually thought I really wanted to, especially when I was getting more into global health. I thought I wanted to work at like a foundation. And so that work always seemed really interesting. And I think at some point I ended up at the nexus of innovation, policy, and global health. And that felt like a sweet spot for me. And so that really opened up my lens to what, towards what a career in entrepreneurship could look like, especially in the impact space.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, Pat, what did you study? What did you want to do after school?
Yeah, so I did kind of a hodgepodge of things. I was a computer engineering major, but then also did some economics and was in the Kellogg program. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do coming out of Northwestern. But I was always very focused on sustainability and finding a way to apply that in my career. And so after I came out of Northwestern, I started to get more and more involved in food and agriculture from a sustainability angle, and particularly started to learn more and more about the seafood business and the impact that that has on the world's oceans. And that kind of led me to founding 12 Tides.
And Pat, maybe we'll just stick with you and snake our way back. Can you just walk through, since you've had the longest professional career out of school here, what jobs you had or how you got to the point where you were comfortable starting 12 Tides?
Yeah, so I came out of Northwestern and I went to McKinsey, where I did a couple of years of pretty standard consulting. but was very focused on the food and agriculture sector, kind of ranging from upstream things all the way down to retail. And so that, started to introduce me to the impact that the food system has on an environment. And I grew up in a ultra conservationist family, and that was sort of part of our values and something I wanted to pursue. Coming out of McKinsey, I joined an investment fund on their food and agriculture practice to dive a little bit more deeply into some of those businesses and getting to understand that industry a lot better. And within that, I actually focused on the global seafood sector for a couple of years, which is a very opaque sort of global industry, and there's a lot of not so good parts of it. And if you kind of open the hood, you'll start to see a lot of those things and the impacts that they have on the oceans. And so coming out of that, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of what needed to change at the intersection of our food systems and the oceans, and how I plan to change that. And I also knew enough people that I felt comfortable that I had the network that I needed to, and the experts that I needed to bring in to create really meaningful change.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you spent a bunch of time working at companies with this focus, learning from and making contacts rather than necessarily just diving right in. It's an interesting strategy. Going back to Natasha, you mentioned you worked in global health after school. What exactly did you do up until the point where you co-founded Monarch Parents?
Yeah, so out of Northwestern, I knew I wanted to be abroad for a period of time, and so I applied for a bunch of fellowships. So the Fulbright Fellowship, and then the Clinton Fellowship in Public Health, and then I went to India to pursue that work. And I was basically doing research around the space of maternal and newborn health. And I very quickly realized that I was missing out on the fast-paced environment of, a more business-oriented organization. I was doing my research with a nonprofit. And so I decided to move back to Chicago because I'd studied music. I really needed to find ways to kind of build up my business acumen. So I joined a corporate innovation team in Chicago. It was, I did a lot of internal strategy consulting there. And after I felt like I had learned what I needed to at that point, I moved back to India to join a company called Bempu Health. And we worked on medical innovations that were aimed at reducing newborn mortality. And so we were primarily selling to governments and donor agencies across the world, such as UNICEF, and really kind of using those on the ground insights to funnel our innovation pipeline. And so part of that process was, as we were learning more about what we wanted to solve, we were thinking about different geographic contexts. And the US obviously comes up when you think about maternal health. We're one of the few developed nations in the world that has a maternal mortality rate that is actually getting worse. And so when we saw that, we were kind of confused, but it also really encouraged us to really do a deep dive into this. And so through that research, we spun Monarch Parents out of Bempu because it was aimed at US consumers, unlike our global health practice. So I moved back to the US in 2019 to really come back to San Francisco and launch the company here.
Great, and we'll dive into it in a second, but just to wrap up, Sonia, you mentioned you were a software engineer at Braintree for a bit. Walk us through that, and then also maybe just dive into what changes and what your mission is.
Yeah, definitely. So after graduating, I was a software engineer over at Braintree. That's a SaaS company that is effectively a payments provider for any other company or merchant that wants to accept payments online. And the whole business of Braintree is basically making it easy to pay and making the commerce experience as frictionless as possible. And so, I spent a couple of years making it so that if you are on a storefront thinking about buying a t-shirt, pressing that pay button is very, very natural to you. And as we made this an easier and easier experience, it just really got me thinking about commerce and how commerce is booming and rising, and how much good can come from, interweaving social impact into that experience. And at the same time, like you mentioned, my co-founder is Umar, who was my computer science partner back at Northwestern. And throughout those years, we stayed in touch. He was actually in Chicago, but we always tinkered on ideas together. And we really found ourselves gravitating towards what we coined the giving economy, but effectively this idea that today consumers are becoming more and more attracted to brands that align with their values. And so, kind of coupling my experience at Braintree and seeing how to really scale an effective commerce experience, and also seeing this rising tide, we thought it was a really great time to go ahead and launch a company that basically enables a more meaningful commerce experience. And so what we are a SaaS provider. So any brand or any merchant that wants to give back and engage their customers through impact can. So that can be, adding roundups or adding the ability to donate at checkout. It could be adding it to a reward system. We're really that platform that powers any type of custom experience the brand wants.
I love it. And change is relatively new. When did you guys start? I'm also going to drop your link just in the chat. Everyone can check that out.
Yeah, thanks. We actually quit our jobs in March, and then we were in the EIR program through you actually over in San Francisco in the garage, but we got to go to that location one day and then shelter in place was mandated. So our timing was really incredible.
Yeah, totally. And so how far have you guys come since you have been working on it full time? Do you have product, customers?
Yeah, so what we did is we actually launched a pilot program through a mobile app. So this idea of, enhancing that end commerce experience, we recognize there's a lot of tech that goes into actually integrating with the merchant. So we took that completely out of their hands, built a mobile app that allowed our 10 customers to basically reward their end customers with donation rewards. And we launched this back in June, ran this for about, 1.5 months, gathered the analytics that we needed to really prove out the power of the platform. And we actually just closed our first, venture round to now go ahead and be heads down and build out these more robust SDKs.
Congratulations. It's very exciting.
Yeah, thanks.
Natasha, back to you. I know you mentioned you were spinning Monarch Parents out of this other company you're working for in India. What's the goal and what's the mission with Monarch?
Yeah, so the mission is to really empower families to start the experience that they have when they're having a child, and to really give them information that they can utilize in a very real way. Part of the issue that we found when we were kind of doing our deep dive here was that the experience of having a child is something that we kind of think is very natural and it just happens, but that's really not true. There are a lot of medical decisions that are required throughout the process, both in the prenatal and the postpartum period. And there's a lot of information out there, but it's incredibly complex to kind of weave together the right set of information that's specific to each family, because everyone can potentially have a different experience with this. And so at Monarch, we've created this continuum of care between the prenatal and postpartum period by connecting families with experts, and these are experts that have backgrounds as nurses or doulas, and they really serve as a point person for each family throughout their entire journey. And so they start working with families during the course of their pregnancy. They're providing, regular communication, video sessions, text messages, and content that's unique to each family that they work with. And they're really able to upskill and help advocate for families around the decision-making that they have coming up for them. And so to date, we've worked with about 130 families across 25 states. We've been piloting this program. And it's been great. It's been going quite well.
And once again, this feels like a good time to launch when everyone's doing.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was really interesting. I mean, we just saw hospitals completely shut down. All non-elective procedures. Obviously, childbirth is not a elective procedure, but when you think about prenatal visits, the number of prenatal visits significantly dropped for families. Partners were not allowed to visit or attend these appointments. In some states, partners were not allowed at, in delivery rooms. So it's a pretty wild time to have a child, but things have gotten better. And we certainly saw a boost in our business because of that.
Yeah, my niece was born in July, so luckily healthy, but
yeah, that's great.
Pat, back to you. I have a feeling that 12 Tides has something to do with the global agriculture.
Yeah. So at 12 Tides, we source organic kelp from regenerative ocean farms here in the US and make tasty and ocean-friendly snacks. And so after spending a whole bunch of time in the seafood industry, I really I saw all the bad parts of the way our food system interacts with the oceans, mostly coastline destruction, overfishing, pollution, and just given the pressure on the global food system and the impact it has on emissions and climate change and sustainability. I knew that relationship had to change. And so for my time in the seafood industry, I also got to know some people who had started to grow kelp on these regenerative ocean farms here in the US. And basically the idea behind that is that by growing kelp in this particular way, you can not only not have a bad impact on the surrounding marine ecosystems, but really do an active good. Kelp farming removes a ton of excess carbon, 20 times more efficiently than rainforests would from the ocean, which mitigates acidification. They can improve water quality and provide habitat for biodiverse marine life. And I saw this as a solution to a lot of those problems and believe that it should be a much bigger part of our food system, especially here in the United States. And so bringing that product to people and building products around that, and then also telling the story about what is kind of the current state of ocean food systems and what it should be, and getting people to understand and buy into that is really what we set out to do with the 12 Tides.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about that is the more that you sell and grow, the more carbon you're removing from the atmosphere, the more ecosystem you're providing for, like you said, diverse marine life. So it just seems like really great alignment. I'm curious in your research when you start to think about kelp as this positive, plant or what have you. Were there other examples of snacks or foods that people regularly ate made out of kelp, or did you have to kind of start from scratch in research and development to find something that specifically like the US population would find interesting and tasty?
Yeah, that was exactly it. And we kind of started at the beginning and found everything that was out there. And me and my co-founder, we ordered like one of everything and we tried everything, and a lot of it didn't taste very good or wasn't really built for sort of a mainstream US audience. And it's also a very young industry, so there just are not very many things out there. And so we decided to, it was an incredible opportunity to build our own product. And we, started in our own kitchen, and we cooked up like 10 different products to start trying and testing. We spent about a year whittling that down and refining recipes and really focusing that first year on consumer feedback and finding something that would work and that would scale. And that is kind of what we've brought to market over the course of the past 6 months or so.
Got it. And so are you selling primarily kind of direct to consumer online? Do you have retail partnerships, or what's your strategy been with getting the product out to the market?
Yeah, so it's been a multi-channel approach, and I'd say our business is about half online and retail partners. And COVID, just as we were getting off the ground, introduced a nice little wrinkle for us in April. But luckily, we were early on enough that we could sort of adjust our strategy to fit more of a COVID world, which pushed us much more toward the online side of things. And so we have third-party online partners as well as our own direct site that we sell through.
Got it. I want to pause for just a second since we're already 20 minutes in, just to say if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If they're for a specific person or more general, we'll either try to work them into the conversation or we can kind of save them for Q&A at the end. So please feel free to ask questions. This next one, whoever wants to take it first, we'll let go. But I think a lot of students and alums want to start a business that has a social impact or is mission driven, but they often end up drifting towards starting a nonprofit or community organization rather than a for-profit business. I'm curious how you guys kind of assess aligning your mission with the for-profit business model and what the challenges of that were. So I'm not sure if either of you wants to kick that one off.
I can.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Pat. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Natasha.
I'll just say something quickly. I mean, I think there are tremendous advantages and also disadvantages to going through that for-profit route. I saw this very clearly between the work I was doing in India. I mean, like as I mentioned, the first experience I was there for was research with a nonprofit NGO, and it was slow. I mean, it took a really long time to get the work done. There was also an issue of kind of the talent pipeline that we could potentially have at an organization like that, because we weren't investing in talent. First is the second place I happened to be at in India, in Bangalore. It was a startup and it was a for-profit mission-driven company, but sustainability was really built into that business model because we knew at some point that we couldn't rely on grant funding forever. It was non-dilutive capital, which was great for us, but the goal was never to be on grant funding forever. And so it really forced us to work very quickly. We were thinking a lot about how do we expand our portfolio of innovations to really increase customer LTV, to reduce our acquisition costs because of that. And I think if you can kind of think about for-profit and mission or impact work through the lens of sustainability, what does it really mean to be a sustainable organization that will do good over a long period of time rather than just for the next year or the next 5 years? That to me has been kind of the difference in thought that I've accumulated over the past few years.
Got it. So it sounds like having the ability to scale up and invest in talent and grow is part of the allure of being for-profit instead of relying on grants that you have to continuously renew. Pat, did you have something to say on the topic?
Yeah, I think one of the ways we think about it is just directly tying our impact metrics to our business model. And one of the core things for us is how much kelp do we source, and we source this directly from the farm. So the more we source, the more they're going to be able to grow every year, and the more impact that we create from these regenerative ocean farms. And those two things are one for one. There's no sort of variation and sacrifices. The more food products that we're able to sell, the more kelp we're sourcing, and those things grow one for one with each other. So really aligning that business success to that impact metric that you're trying to take has been the way we've thought about it. Yeah,
it's very fortunate to have, or I guess it's intentional, it's not luck, to have your incentives align your impact with the health of your business. Sonia, I know you work with a lot of nonprofit partners. Any thoughts on this kind of subject of having a for-profit company?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question that we actually get pretty often because we are a bridge between for-profits and nonprofits. And so, what we preach actually to the for-profit partners is this idea of, consumers demand value alignment. Consumers are expecting you to step up today. And, as a business, you should be assessed with your sustainability and social impact practices in place. And so, that kind of comes down to a triple bottom line with the idea that really making an impact as a business should be part of your business model. And we think that incentivizing that in the modern day actually makes it more impactful in the long term because, things like economic downturns happen. That's just the way of life. But what we're seeing today is that corporate donations actually just drop off at an inconsistent rate. Instead, it should just relationally decline if it's part of its genuine business model. And so what we are really trying to do is make donations, social impact, a need to have as far as business models go, as instead of a nice to have. And in the long run, we think that that's far more important.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads into another question I have that I'd love to just piggyback off of, which is, in what ways do you see being a mission-driven company? I think especially these days, corporations are seeing it more important, whether it's customer loyalty, recruiting. In what ways is being a mission-driven company and having that clear focus that anyone can see from your website or your product or your business model an asset to your company?
Oh yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it wins your customer. You know, the barrier to entry to actually start a brand today is so much lower than it was even a year ago, and then significantly lower than 5 years ago. And that's only increasing. So this idea of consumers caring about the mission of your brand is going to become increasingly important as there are more and more choices for them to really choose from. And so to your point, you know, there's so many metrics around customer loyalty getting boosted, employee loyalty getting boosted, actually attracting more customers through cause marketing, which is this whole lens of marketing that comes from aligning yourselves with missions and other nonprofits that really resonate with that end customer. And so, you know, today, as so many brands that are looking to differentiate themselves dump money in ads and other superficial means of engagement, they really can start repurposing that into something more meaningful, more engaging, and in the long run, cultivate a stronger customer base.
I agree. And it's a super exciting opportunity. Natasha, Pat, any thoughts on kind of the positives and negatives of having this clear mission, where maybe it's difficult to make some decisions because it would go, you know, against your mission or your impact?
You know, no, I agree completely with what Sonia said. I think the only detriment that I've seen in our for-profit structure, and more so in India than in the US, primarily because we were working, like I said, with government contracts. And so as a for-profit company, that's kind of always scrutinized under a different lens than if you are a nonprofit, when you're trying to get into, you know, budgets and proposals. I think sometimes it's easier to kind of just like vet the nonprofit and believe that their intentions are in a different place than a for-profit. But truthfully, in the US, I feel like it's an asset to us because, as Sonia mentioned, from a customer perspective, from a talent perspective, I think everyone wants to work towards, you know, social impact. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of the customer side of things, I think Sonia said it beautifully. And if you're able to create that, you know, more emotional connection and a values-based connection with your customer, it's such a stronger and more, you know, resilient relationship with that customer than, I don't know, maybe, you know, clicking through an Instagram ad that looks beautiful or something like that. And, you know, that foundation that you build your business upon and those values, like, that's really what helps create that. But to your second point on conflicts, like I think, you know, one part where I've seen that arise is by raising money. You know, if you raise money and in the traditional corporate governance sense, you also have a duty to maximize value to shareholders, and that can create conflict sometimes, and that's a purely commercial interest. And kind of the way we've seen mitigating that is first going back to my other point of, you know, just a 1-for-1, you know, metric with the impact that you're creating. Like our business does well and our investors will do well, and then our impact is also created, and like one can't happen without the other. And then the second way, obviously, that we've done that is by becoming a public benefit corporation, registering it as that, which gives the company a duty to, you know, achieve its social mission beyond just maximizing shareholder value. And that's formally documented in all of the company's paperwork. So.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it draws a distinction. I'm curious, like you've been intentional about your setup and your investors setting up as a B Corp, a public benefit. Did you try, or have you raised traditional venture capital, or have you stayed focused on a different type of investor who's like aligned with the mission?
Yeah, we focused a little bit more on you know, different types of investors. I think one is being a food business, and I think it's not always the right fit for sort of the traditional you know, venture model and sort of the growth and you know, return profile that they're looking for. And then, you know, secondly, also just the impact alignment. You know, we're looking for investors that also want to create the impact that we want to create and are going to you know, stick behind those impact goals even in the hard times. And you know, we've been pretty transparent about that in our fundraising process.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And Sonia, I want to get to you, and maybe Natasha, you as well, because you mentioned you had just closed a seed round of venture capital. Again, congratulations.
Thanks.
Did you find having such kind of a clear mission or social impact, did that complicate fundraising? Did it make it easier? Or how did you kind of see that process playing out given what changes?
Yeah. So, I think regardless of business model, and for us, it happens to be that we are very mission driven and social impact is embedded directly into our mission. But it's important when you find investors to just find someone that believes in your vision and your mission, because that's how they really help you. They have capital, but they have a network, they have, drive, they have their own experiences. And so you want to make sure there is that value alignment inherently. For us, having a clear mission, I think, was very helpful, because you go to each of these investors that have a thesis. They have their, portfolio, they have the way that they can help you. And so for them, understanding your blue sky vision and also how being mission driven actually helps you as a company really just helps them help you in the long run. And so, we found great success looking for investors that have either social impact in their portfolio or also just having commerce experience, because it comes back down to the fact that we are really trying to make it the new norm for businesses to be impactful. And so we're not trying to silo ourselves as going after certain type of venture capital. We're going after traditional venture capital because we want this to be the new traditional way of doing business.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I have a follow-up, but Natasha, any thoughts on the subject of fundraising given this company?
Yeah, I mean, I think with our first round, we were really lucky to find investors that they had a social impact spin on their fund, but it wasn't like the overarching or overwhelming driver. I think it was kind of a nice balance for us because, again, as Sonia mentioned, we didn't want to silo ourselves. I think, by being a healthcare product, though, it is really easy to kind of tie it to impact. But for us, really convincing investors around the long-term potential of a product like this, a big piece of pushback that we often get is, as a femtech company, what is the actual market opportunity here with a product like this, right? A lot of investors don't really understand that, especially within women's health. And so kind of trying to convince them around what that opportunity is going to look like, in 5 years or in 10 years, rather than just what it is today, which, by the way, is actually, it's pretty great. We've really had to work hard on that, but we've been lucky to really come across investors who do have companies in their portfolio that kind of match that same drive, and investors who are excited about it as well.
Yeah, I like that. And I know we just have about 10 minutes left, so just want to remind anyone, if you have any questions for the panelists, please drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I have plenty of more questions. One of the things, obviously, given the title of this panel, that we've been talking about is the growing relevance and importance of brands kind of having a mission. I'm curious because I think a lot of brands and companies know that they should, but I'm curious what you think differentiates kind of a superficial mission or mission-driven company or brand versus a genuine one. And I'll give you a second to think on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. So I think anecdotally speaking, there's some great examples from this year of certain companies that have stepped up effectively and certain companies that have not. So when we actually go talk to brands, we tell them to be effective, you need to mean it, right? You need to have tangible, concrete actions to actually back up each of your words. And so I think what really proves to consumers today that a brand means it is if they actually are making changes to their company policy, if they are concretely donating money, if they are, maybe delineating times for their customers or their employees to volunteer for causes they love. It's not really enough anymore to post a black square online or go ahead and have greenwashing campaigns, because we were all raised with data around us and with stories and with social media. And so we can suss things out so quickly that it's not enough to just make a statement. And so what we push and what we think is more powerful in the long run is make concrete steps that you mean. Don't, jump up and say something that comes to your mind. Really think through what your mission as a company is and make meaningful strides towards it.
That makes a lot of sense. It's in your actions, not your words, where it comes out. Yeah. one of the things that I really like about the three of you on this panel is the diversity in business models. So Pat, you're selling a physical product to consumers and retailers. Natasha, you're selling a service to consumers. And Sonia, you're selling a service into businesses. And please correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm making assumptions there. But I'm curious, how you landed on these business models and customers. Sonia, you could have been going for kind of end consumers. Pat, you could have been like a kelp wholesaler. Like, what did you test out different business models, and how did you land where you are? And whoever wants to take that first, just go for it.
Yeah, I can maybe kick that one off. I think there were a couple of things that we saw. Number one was just this hole in the marketplace that I talked about earlier. There was not really a product that fit and solved this problem. Both kind of fitting current consumer trends in the food industry, but also solving the problem for the industry. And so there was kind of this hole in the product. And then, secondly, there was this hole in the kelp ecosystem and that community. There's a whole bunch of people who are growing kelp and very few kelp products in the marketplace. And actually, one of the things that we found when I went out to go visit our kelp farms is that a number of kelp farmers could not find high enough value sales channels to sell their product at the end of the season. And so they were just like cutting it off their ropes and letting it sink to the bottom of the ocean. And that was, there's obviously a sort of rang a bell for me in that there's an opportunity here to, create, high value products, tasty premium food products out of this kelp. And, in doing so, that would help the farmers tremendously because they're losing a lot of, product that way. And we've been able to do that. And then, also kind of fill this void in the market for a really good tasting and really healthy kelp product.
Thank you for that. Sonia or Natasha, any thoughts on it?
Yeah. So, for us, actually, our origin story didn't start with retailers at all. It started with the fact that we noticed ourselves, our online communities, our friends talking about brand value alignment and being really excited when they could take a SoulCycle class and donate, or they would post each other's Venmo receipts. And we just really organically saw this community arising. And as we noticed that, we said, okay, how do we make it easier for people to give back? There's clearly a desire to do so. And, given our experiences and other things that we were able to interview, we realized that commerce is one of the quickest ways to scale, any action and make it a very second nature part of your lives. And so given that, what we did is we just ran a pilot, and our first pilot actually did have a consumer facing endpoint. And we listened to the data, we listened to the analytics, we realized that the retailers were really our customers, and to make it seamless and a much more native and powerful experience, it has to feel like the merchant's ecosystem. And so we honestly just went for it. And I think that that's the best way to learn is, find a problem, find something you're passionate about and test it out, and just be nimble and change it as it goes.
I like that. I completely agree. Good advice. Natasha, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we thought about it two ways. One, we were trying to see how can we put together this product with the least time required and really test it out in the market in real time. And so going direct to consumer felt like the obvious choice there. But similar to what Pat said, we were really looking at like, what's the need for this and where does that exist? We were seeing in the femtech space that a lot of companies were building around benefits and really trying to partner with HR to offer as an employee benefit to companies. But the problem we were seeing with that was it really left out a big chunk of women across the country who would require, or who do require a service like the one we were providing. And so we saw that opening in the market. We knew what we were up against in terms of, the acquisition costs being higher in B2C channels, but we thought the need was much higher that way too. And we'd be able to reach those customers much quickly if we went B2C.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. All right, we have two questions left here. The first is from Hung, who asks, have you ever felt that your business would have been easier if it had not been mission driven, but profit driven? Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd maybe just say one thing on that. So first of all, absolutely not. I never think it would be easier. And the one point I would make is that starting a company is really, really hard. And there will be a lot of hard days in the early on period. And, knowing that you're doing something that you really believe in and, really aligns with, your values as an entrepreneur, helps you kind of get through a lot of those hard days. So I think just for me, having, a mission-driven company that, has values that also align with, my values as an entrepreneur, helps keep you driven.
Really well said.
For us, we actually view those as very coupled. So I touched on that a little bit earlier, but, we want our profits to, in a correlated direction, go up as our mission is being achieved. And so by really making a, aligned business model, we can achieve both of those at the same time. And that's really important to us as people who are preaching triple bottom line to all of our end customers and telling them that they actually will have, better retention, better customer engagement by being more mission driven. And so we are really trying to push that new traditional business to be mission driven.
I like that. Okay, last question, since we just have a couple minutes left here. And our audience is primarily, again, kind of current Northwestern students who are working around the garage, tinkering on a project, interested in social impact. What would each of your advice be for an ambitious entrepreneurial student who wants to start a company that has a mission?
I can go ahead and answer that quickly. I think for anyone who's really interested in starting a mission-driven company or business, I would say go become experts to the best of your ability in that space. I mean, I think just from, this is the first time I'm, meeting Sonia and Pat, but I'm hearing from them that they were both, they took a lot of time to really understand the spaces that they work in. And I feel like that was the approach that I took with the work that I do as well. I was on the ground for quite a bit of time and really understanding what maternal and newborn health looks like in the context that were important to me. And so don't be shy to do that groundwork, or, really roll your sleeves up and get to it. You can learn a lot by reading, but really doing the work is what matters.
Thanks, Natasha.
I guess my piece of advice would be to just start doing it. I think the biggest and hardest obstacle for both my co-founder and I was to quit our jobs and actually test it out. And that's when we really learned the most, because as you talk to people and, like Natasha said, you can read, but when you actually get out there and throw something at the wall, you learn so much more. And especially as students, I think that one thing I wish I had done a little bit more when I was at university is just test ideas out. You already found something that you're passionate about if you're itching to do something. So find the lowest version and the least effort version of that product and just get it out there live.
I think that's great advice. Pat, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add on to that is, from a very early stage, you should define your values for your organization and know what your non-negotiables are.
I like that. I think that's a great place to end as well. And I know we're at time. Thank you all. I'm going to drop your websites in the chat again for everyone to take with them. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate your insights and advice, and wish you guys the best of luck, and looking forward to continuing following your journeys.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.